Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, a Hey Mary Kay edition. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot. Questions from our Football Insider subscribers as we now enter week 3 of the Browns head coaching search. Of course, we're still playing the waiting game. One of the candidates, at least one of the candidates they want to talk to, they'll have to wait until next week. That would be Nathan Shieldhouse, the pass game coordinator for the Rams. Second interviews are starting. We did a big Jim Schwartz pod on Friday, so go back and check that out. But a very interesting domino fell today, Mary Kay, one that I don't know. It was surprising, but it wasn't. It always felt like maybe if the Bills didn't quite get where they were supposed to get to, Sean McDermott could take the fall. He ends up taking the fall today. Surprising because they did at least get to the divisional round and lost a close game. But Abe in Huntington, West Virginia, and one of your cats in the background, they're very excited about the availability of Sean McDermott. Abe in Huntington, West Virginia gets right to the point. Hey, Mary Kay, do you think the Browns will interview Sean McDermott?
Well, I think they will at least call about Sean McDermott. And the reason why I think that is because most of the other head coaches that have become available, they have at least inquired about. Now, as far as John Harbaugh is concerned, they did a 45-minute call with John Harbaugh. He did preliminary phone calls with 5 of 6 teams that reached out to him in the early going, and the Browns were one of those teams. And then he narrowed down his choices, and he ended up not going anywhere after he did the Giants interview. So it didn't go anywhere, but the Browns tossed their hat into the ring. And then we know that they have already scheduled a second interview with Mike McDaniel, the fired coach of the Dolphins. And so I do think that they are looking at some of these guys that have been successful in their careers. And certainly Sean McDermott is one of those. Another reason for that is the fact that if you remember, and I know you do, back in 2016, the top brass loved Sean McDermott here. And that was Paul DePodesta, Sashi Brown, and Andrew Berry. That was the kind of power triumvirate at the time. And they loved Sean McDermott, but they were kind of overruled by the Haslams. They fell in love with Hugh Jackson. They went ahead and hired Hugh Jackson in 2016. Sean McDermott was the defensive coordinator of the Panthers. He interviewed here. Like I said, those guys really liked him. He ended up not getting hired until the next year in Buffalo. And we know that, kind of the rest is history. I mean, they've made the playoffs 8 times since then. And he's made the AFC Championship game twice since then. Of course, they also drafted Josh Allen, which we all know how that went here. The Browns passed on Josh Allen in favor of Baker Mayfield in 2018. And Sean McDermott and Josh Allen went on to have tremendous success together, at least in the regular season in Buffalo. Now, the problem came once they got to the playoffs. They've lost in the wild card round twice, in the divisional round 4 times, and in the AFC Championship game twice. So they've struggled once they got to the playoffs, but part of that was because Patrick Mahomes was in their way, right? And now this year, Pat Mahomes wasn't in their way, and yet they were not able to do it. And we all saw what happened the other day, that Josh, he was in tears after the game. He just could not stop turning that ball over. It was sad to see, really. And he felt so bad about that afterwards because he knows that he let the team down. But in the end, Sean McDermott takes the fall. Now he's available. I do think that the Browns will at least call about him. I don't know if they are so far into their candidates and so excited about what they have that they don't want to upset the apple cart, but I think you at least have to make that phone call.
Yeah, and I think you have to be able to pivot when something like this happens and a guy becomes available you didn't expect. That's one of the benefits of having not hired someone. And they're not in a position to hire someone right now either because they obviously haven't satisfied the Rooney Rule to this point. So it's not like they're on the verge of hiring somebody tomorrow. It's still going to take some time. And there are probably some legitimate criticisms out there of Sean McDermott, some reasons that they haven't gotten as far as they want to get to, but that record of success, I mean, while you were talking, I pulled up the Bills Pro Football Reference page, their entire history. I think it's also worth noting he came in and this was a team similar to the Cleveland Browns that had not had a ton of success recently. I mean, you got to go back to You got to go back to 1999 was the last time they made the playoffs before Sean McDermott got there. Of course, I saw on Twitter somebody tweeted out the videos of the day that curse got broken and that drought got broken and guys were crying in the locker room and all that. So, for any shortcomings he might have as a coach, he went into Buffalo and he turned that team into a winner. Obviously, with Josh Allen, it probably doesn't all happen without Josh Allen, but he deserves a lot of credit for what that franchise has become since he took over in 2017.
Yes, he does, because you can take a quarterback like Josh Allen, but then you have to know what to do with him, right? And we've long wondered, would Josh Allen have become Josh Allen in Cleveland? And I think it's a very valid question, because you have to know how to coach a dual threat quarterback like that. And, they had Brian Daboll coaching him, and Brian did an amazing job with Josh Allen. So Josh has a lot to do with why Sean McDermott was so successful all of those years. But they also did a really, really good job of giving him a nice supporting cast and helping maximize his talents and abilities. So it just kind of all works hand in hand. But now we'll see what happens, because I think that there are a number of teams that would probably jump to interview a coach like Sean McDermott. You don't get to the playoffs eight times without doing something right, even if you have a good quarterback. So we'll see what happens here. I would think, and I'm trying to find out, I would think that they would at least kick the tires a little bit and see if they can't maybe add him to their list.
And of course, the other interesting thing here is now you have another job opening, and it's a very enticing job opening. And I don't know where the Bills are going to go. I know early on the rumors were maybe they'd interview Brian Daboll for the job and all of that, but they have to go through the same things that all these other teams have to go through. They have to satisfy the Rooney Rule, all of that. So could that lead them to a candidate like a Nathan Shieldhouse, who maybe they get him in their building and they're like, we really like this guy. And of course, for a guy like that, he's going to look at Josh Allen and say, that's a pretty good way to start my career. Would they call up a Grant Udinsky? Would they call up a Mike McDaniel, right? If the Browns are really, truly interested in Mike McDaniel, could he suddenly be intrigued by that Buffalo job, a team that he had to compete against for all those years in Miami? So, all of these candidates that the Browns are talking to and are moving into that next phase with, even Jim Schwartz, Todd Monken, all these guys, now all of a sudden Buffalo's in play for whoever they want to talk to. And that instantly becomes, I mean, it's probably 1A and 1B between Buffalo and Baltimore right now.
Yeah, can you imagine that Kevin Stefanski's probably going, oh, if I had just waited 2 more days. He, of course, took the Atlanta Falcons job, but who wouldn't want to coach Josh Allen? He's the NFL MVP right now. He's an amazing quarterback. And yes, he's got to get over the hump in the playoffs. They've got to get over the hump. And this was going to be his perfect opportunity with the Chiefs not making the playoffs. But I still think the window is going to be open for him, because the Chiefs might be a little bit in transition. Travis Kelce might end up retiring. Who knows about that? And I think the opportunity might still be there for them to kind of take it to the next level. So it is quite a job opening. And you're right. Some of these guys that have that opportunity might jump at that chance. Conversely, and I wrote this in my story today, there are coaches who are not overly enamored with the Browns quarterback situation right now. And how could you be? It's not a certain situation. You don't know if Deshaun Watson's going to start. You don't know if Shedeur is going to start. You don't know if they're going to draft a quarterback number 6 overall. And the new head coach is going to have a say in the matter, but every single head coach knows the truth. And that is, you're really only as good as your quarterback. And so until they have a clearer picture of what's going on here at quarterback, I do think that this job might be one of the more challenging ones to take.
Yeah, and that's what I keep coming back to this with, like a guy like Grant Udinsky, who is super intriguing. Like, I've been watching interviews with him and reading up on him, and I know Brown's Twitter is incredibly excited about the possibility of him being that guy. But then I keep coming back to this idea of they've kind of done, him and his agent have kind of done the work of building up his profile. He's gone through the interview process now, at least with the Browns. he could go back to Jacksonville for another year, gain that year of experience, and head into next year as a top candidate once again, maybe. Or he could tie himself to the Browns, where there isn't a there isn't a clear path forward at quarterback. And by the way, like if this I know Andrew Berry survived this last season, and I would imagine that, the Haslams are in it with him for the long haul, but we've seen how quickly things can change in this league if you start losing and those losses start to pile up, right? So then do you also want to tie yourself to a GM who, if things go completely sideways, are you sure he's still going to be here in a year or two? So that's one of the things, Udinski doesn't strike me as a guy that runs away from any challenge. So maybe it just doesn't matter to him. But, when it comes to these young offensive minds who might have a few years here, who might have some runway for that head coaching opportunity, I wonder if they're going to jump at this like we think they might.
Well, we know that some of these candidates have already worked with really good quarterbacks. Nate Scheelhaus has worked with Matt Stafford in the NFL, and Grant has worked with Sam Darnold. He's also coached up JJ McCarthy, and he has worked with Trevor Lawrence. So these guys are working with elite NFL quarterbacks. And the Browns do have an elite quarterback from some years ago on their roster right now in Deshaun Watson, but nobody knows if he's going to be truly healthy next year. And he has not started a full season since 2020. He went 4-12 that year. However, he did throw for 4,800 yards in Houston that year. And his rating was, I think, first or second in the NFL at 112 that year. Might have been second. But so he was really, really good the last time he started a full season, but that was a long, long time ago. That was a fractured shoulder ago. That was a ruptured Achilles and a re-ruptured Achilles ago. 3 surgeries ago and an 11-game suspension ago. So it would be a leap of faith to think that Deshaun Watson can come in here and be the 3-time quarterback, 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback that he was in Houston. Maybe he can do it. He looked good in those 3 weeks that he practiced with the team. But I still think you would be taking somewhat of a risk if you're putting all of your eggs in that basket or most of your eggs in that basket. And then we know that Shedeur, he's a work in progress. He flashed signs of quality NFL starter. He flashed some really good things, some elite accuracy, some elusiveness, some it factor, some good decision making. But he has a ways to go. And teams are going to try to catch up to him and take away the things that he does do well. And if they catch on to him, then you never know what a team is going to have to do to try to beat those kinds of things. You see CJ Stroud struggling right now, right? I mean, didn't we think that CJ was going to be on a trajectory to who knows what, NFL MVP someday, it seemed like, right? I mean, he was off to the races as a rookie. So, and now we see him struggling. So it's really hard to say what's going on with the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation. And I think it is having an impact on the coach search. I know it is because I've talked to a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people over the last couple of weeks. And I know that it is a factor in the minds of some coaches and some candidates. So I don't know if Nate or Grant, even though they're very young, those guys are going to be head coaches in the NFL someday soon. And they probably do have to think long and hard about coming to Cleveland and taking an opportunity where the quarterback picture is murky right now.
Yeah, and I just, there's no guarantee that the opportunities will be there a year from now. We know that. But I think Ben Johnson laid out a very interesting template, a guy who was a hot coaching candidate and kind of waited and was picky and ended up in Chicago and, liked what he saw out of Caleb Williams and obviously has turned him into, potentially that next quarterback and, the next guy that's maybe has a chance to lead his team to a Super Bowl. So it really is. I think the Texans thing is interesting because it really does come down to, if CJ Stroud would have built on that trajectory from his rookie year, maybe we're talking about them having a chance to go to the Super Bowl next week. But because he's struggled and he's sort of has spun his wheels and he's got, Troy Aikman talking about him on the broadcast about how he's got to, you know, he just hasn't been able to build on that rookie year. It just shows you that really is what matters. I mean, because Houston has built, that's as talented as a roster as there is in football. And that defense is, you know, that might be the best defense in football. But because the quarterback hasn't delivered, they're sitting at home watching the games next week, just like everybody else.
Doesn't it baffle you and surprise you that he hasn't been able to keep
I
climbing?
mean, we sat there and watched that wild card game when the Texans just absolutely destroyed that defense. And he was making throws, and I can't, like, I'm shocked. I really can't believe that he hasn't become one of those guys yet.
No, I can't believe it either. And then you talk about Caleb Williams, and boy, oh boy, can Caleb Williams make some incredible throws. But we didn't just have to see that touchdown pass yesterday, that just wow, holy, you know what, TD pass yesterday to know that, because he was throwing those kind of passes, not quite like that, but he was throwing those kinds of passes on the Cleveland Browns. And he's just so good. He's really, really good. And you hope that Shedeur Sanders can be that for the Cleveland Browns, but nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. I think the Browns see something in him, and I think they're excited about him, and they think he can probably be something special. But the truth of the matter is, you just don't know yet. And it's going to take a lot of building around him to make sure that he can also get to the point where he needs to get to. But once defensive coordinators start digging into your tape, digging into your film, identify some of your weaknesses, and then attack them, it can be rough for you to figure out how to beat that and counteract that. And he still has that ahead of him and in front of him whenever he gets his opportunity again with the Browns.
Okay, let's get to a little more Sean McDermott here, because I did want to ask this from Mavro and Cbus. Hey, Mary Kay. So if the Browns decide to interview Sean McDermott, is he more of a CEO coach, or does that mean Jim Schwartz would be out?
It's a great question. It is a great question. I have to wonder, because Sean McDermott is a defensive coach. He was a longtime defensive coordinator, longtime defensive assistant with the Eagles, then defensive coordinator with the Panthers, before he became head coach of the Bills. So in that scenario, do you keep Jim Schwartz around? I guess you can make a strong case for it. If he's willing to stick around, then let that side of the ball cook and let Sean McDermott figure out who his offensive coordinator would be and let him oversee the whole process. So we'll have to see, how that would go. But once again, he's been with Josh Allen. He's been with Josh Allen, and unless somebody can convince him that Deshaun Watson is still a Pro Bowl quarterback, I think that's going to be a tough sell for him.
He did lose to Deshaun Watson one year in one of those wild card games. I think that
Yes.
that was the year that he had the weird little pitch to, was it Carlos Hyde? I don't remember. We don't need to go down Houston Texans memory lane here, but he did lose to Deshaun in one of those. I do think, like, if there is we've talked about this defense as a selling point, and I don't think, I would imagine Jim Schwartz would want to go elsewhere if you hired somebody like Sean McDermott. McDermott's always been a guy that has kept a pretty heavy thumb on that defensive side, even if somebody else is calling the defense. So I would imagine Schwartz would maybe want to go someplace else. But if I'm Sean McDermott and I'm looking at a defense that I wanted to coach, I've got to imagine this is right at the top of the list. Now, to your point, he also probably fully understands I got to have a quarterback too. But, I get to coach Myles Garrett. I get to coach Carson Schlesinger, who gets Luke Kuechly comparisons. And like, I coached that guy in Carolina. Sure, I'll do that again. I get to have a shutdown corner in Denzel Ward. I can live with that. So there would be at least that selling point. Now, I don't know if that would be enough. And I don't know, maybe maybe he just ends up going to Baltimore or something like that. But at the very least, for a defensive guy to look at this situation and look at that talent on that side of the ball, that would at least be something you could sell him on.
It is a great selling point, especially for a defensive-minded head coach. That defense has got to be tantalizing for him. It's got to be. There's so much talent, and the talent that they added last year, those guys are only going to be better in their second year. Carson, Mason, uh, you've got Tyson Campbell now. So, you're really good at every level of that defense. It really would be a tremendous, tremendous selling point. But every single head coach in the NFL knows the quickest way to lose your job is to not have a quarterback. So they would have to figure something out. He'd have to have a comfort level with what's going on in the building right now, or he'd have to have a path forward at quarterback, whether that would be maybe somebody that's in the draft. Maybe they like somebody that we don't even know about yet. Or can they get through this year with Deshaun and Shedeur and then maybe go back into the draft next year and see if they can't get their man in next year's draft and sell him on it that way, while knowing that you can at least stay in games with decent quarterback play next year and really, really good defensive play. So lots of things to consider here, but I did have somebody pretty close to the situation say, I doubt he would come here given the current state of affairs in the quarterback room for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and then look, when you've had that opportunity to coach a guy like Josh Allen, obviously that's something you're gonna understand what that means. And he had, when he was the defensive coordinator in Carolina, they had Cam Newton on the other side. Like you're gonna have like an understanding of what exactly that means. Um, I'm looking up to see who his first quarterback was before they drafted Josh Allen, just out of curiosity. Oh, it was our buddy Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had a year of Tyrod Taylor before they drafted Josh Allen.
Yeah. And they went 9-7 that year.
Yeah. So
And that
see,
was his first year.
they can
So,
sell him on that template. We're going to follow that original Bills template. We got this great defense, and maybe we'll go get a veteran for a year, and then we'll draft a guy the next year.
yeah. And I mean, look, I'm guessing that John Harbaugh probably looked at this quarterback situation and said, I've had Joe Flacco all of my career, and I've had Lamar Jackson all of my career. And when he did the 45-minute interview with the Cleveland Browns, of course, quarterback came up. And I don't know if that's the reason why he did not have the Browns as one of his top choices, but I'm guessing that had something to do with it, because the quarterback picture for this year isn't much better than it was last offseason. There's not a bunch of free agents available. You've got Malik Willis, who might be able to get your hands on. Maybe you can trade for a quarterback. We know what the draft landscape is like. You've got Fernando Mendoza. He'll probably go, of course, number 1. And then you've got Ty Simpson. But there are 3 quarterbacks, 3 teams above the Cleveland Browns in that top 5 that need quarterbacks. And there just aren't enough to go around. So it's a challenging situation unless there's some kind of a sleeper in the draft that we don't know about. And they had one of those last year. They thought they had one in Dylan Gabriel. Maybe they got their eyes on another guy like that. So I don't know, but it doesn't seem like your franchise quarterback is going to be available in this draft or in this free agency or in this trade market.
So let's get to this question here before we wrap up. And this is a little bit of a punch in the gut to Browns fans, maybe, from Christian and Hudson. Hey, Mary Kay, how is it that he said a year ago, we'll go 13 months. How is it that about 13 months ago, Kevin Stefanski and Mike Vrabel were both with the Browns, but now Vrabel is in the AFC title game as head coach of the Patriots, and Kevin Stefanski is head coach of the Falcons, while the Browns have no coach? And that one just sort of stuck with me a little bit, because I don't know if it'll ever completely come back to haunt the Browns. I don't know if he would have taken this job here because of the quarterback situation. But every now and again, I'll look through our photo archive for a story or something, and I'll see Mike Vrabel in Browns gear. And I'll just kind of wonder myself, like, what could have been if the Browns would have pulled the trigger a year earlier on Kevin.
Well, it is interesting to think about, but think of the major reason why Mike Vrabel is succeeding in New England right now, and it's Drake May. It is Drake May. So, and I mean, he's got a really good defense too, of course, because it's Mike Vrabel. But you have to have that quarterback, and I would think that this situation here would have given him pause, and I don't know if he would have wanted to have to deal with it. And in terms of Shedeur Sanders, like I said, I think the Browns see something in him, and unless you share that vision, you might not, you might not be that attractive to them at this point.
Yeah, I keep wondering, like, obviously, I think going back to New England where they had a quarterback kind of being next in line in that Bill Belichick line of succession, that had to be really intriguing to a guy who's a Patriots Hall of Famer. But there is a part of me that wonders if that opportunity to coach his hometown team would have come up, if he would have at least considered it, or if the Browns would have at least had some kind of chance to talk him into sticking around.
Well, he knows how the sausage is made here, so it would have been interesting to see if he would have wanted to do that. I know that he was trying to do some culture change while he was here, just in terms of toughness and all those kinds of things. So I think he would have seen that he would have had a big job ahead of him, just in terms of getting things going the direction that he wanted them to go. But he would have to have had some kind of comfort level that there was a winning quarterback, a really, really good quarterback. It's been so fun to watch these playoffs and watch these amazing batteries between quarterback and receiver, or quarterback tight end. There have been so many catches where I've said, do the Browns really have enough? You know what I mean? Do the Browns have somebody that can make a catch like that? And in some cases, I'm finding myself saying, no, they really need to upgrade their receiving core slash pass catching core, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, and then like in Chicago, they really went. They were telling the story. I think it was on last night's broadcast about how they basically said to Dennis Allen on the defensive side, we're spending our money on the offense. Like and they went out and spent a ton of money on their O line, built that up. You're going to have to figure it out on the defensive side this year. And, so it's stuff like that too. So it's having a young quarterback and then making sure you're supporting him with a really good offensive line and finding weapons and giving him obviously a great play caller in Ben Johnson. It's the entire thing. It's not just obviously get the quarterback is the first thing, but then from there it's let's build this thing around that quarterback.
Absolutely. And I think that hopefully the Browns are really seeing the wisdom right now in stocking your pass catching core, like really stocking it and fortifying it and making sure that you've got what you need on that side of the ball, so that whoever is your quarterback is going to have plenty of really amazing, dangerous weapons. It's so important. You can't be finding guys, under rocks and over here. No, you've really got to find some amazing, amazing receivers slash tight ends, whatever the case may be. And then, of course, you do have to protect your quarterback. But he's got to have 3, 4 amazing options when he looks out there and throws that ball.
Real quick here, because we did get a question about this. What did you think of Kevin ending up in Atlanta?
I think it's good. I think that, he's got Kirk Cousins down there. And the truth of the matter with Michael Penix, I don't really 100% know for sure if they know exactly what they have in Michael Penix either. So hopefully for Kevin, it won't be too much of a rocky road. He deserves some quarterback stability, whether that's with Kirk or Michael or however that works. Michael Penix might not even be back until the start of the season, so they're probably going to need Kirk early on. But I do expect him to take Tommy with him, and he might even take Bubba Ventrone with him, because I think that there are plenty of people on that staff that feel that Bubba didn't necessarily have the talent that he needed to get the job done on his side of the ball. So that is something that could happen. We know he's not going to take Chad O'Shea with him, because Chad took a job with the Kansas City Chiefs today as wide receivers coach. So good for him for that. And then what else in the coaching realm? They interviewed Jim Schwartz today. This was the start of their second wave of interviews. So Jim today, Todd Monken tomorrow, Mike McDaniel on Wednesday. They're going to bring Grant Udinsky in here this week. And then they have to wait until next Monday for Nate Shieldhouse. But these are some of the things that are happening right now.
All right, it's gonna have it's kind of slow right now, but once it once things start happening, a bunch of stuff is gonna happen right in succession. So it should be interesting. And Kevin is you mentioned those weapons. Kevin is gonna look at Drake London and Bijan Robinson and be like, yeah, see, this is what I've been missing the last couple of years. All right, that'll do it for Hey Mary Kay edition of the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen. Just search for Orange and Brown Talk. And if you're not a Football Insider subscriber, where those questions came from, click the blue banner at the top of the page at cleveland.com/Browns. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.